There was a moment, about 2 weeks before everything unraveled, when I caught myself staring at Logan's toothbrush. It sounds ridiculous now, but there I was, leaning against the bathroom sink, staring at that blue-handled thing like it held a secret. It wasn't anything obvious. Just the way it was placed, angled slightly away from mine, like it had been moved in a rush. I remember thinking, did he stay somewhere else last night? But I shook the thought away. I was tired, overworked, paranoid from too many true crime podcasts. I convinced myself I was being dramatic. Back then, Logan and I had been together for just over 3 years. We lived in a cozy 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet part of town, with a dog-eared bookshelf I'd built myself and a temperamental espresso machine that only Logan could get to work. We weren't perfect, but we were steady. Or, at least I thought we were. That morning, I packed his lunch. Something I'd stopped doing months ago, but I was trying to reconnect, trying to show I cared. It was silly maybe, but I cut the sandwich diagonally just the way he liked it and tucked a folded sticky note inside. "You're still my favorite person." I drew a little heart next to it. He didn't mention the note when he came home that evening. Didn't even say whether he liked the sandwich. He was distracted, barely looked up from his phone, mumbled something about work being chaotic, and disappeared into the shower. It was a Thursday. We always made pasta on Thursdays. I waited for him to come back and toss the garlic bread in the oven, like he usually did. But that night, he didn't. He emerged 15 minutes later, already in sweats, rubbing his hair with a towel. "I'm not that hungry," he said, barely glancing at the steaming pot on the stove. "I might just go to bed early." Something in his tone made me pause. Not cold, not angry, just distant. Like he wasn't really here with me. That's when I noticed the cologne. Not his usual warm, woodsy scent. This one was sharp. Sweet. Feminine almost. I wrinkled my nose. "You try a new cologne?" He blinked at me. "What?" "The smell. It's different." He shrugged, too quickly. "Oh, no." Must have been from work. Maybe someone sprayed too much in the elevator or something. I let it go. I always let things go. 3 days later, we had dinner with my mom. She was in one of her theatrical moods, laughing too loud, drinking too much wine, complimenting Logan's haircut a little too often. I watched her hand brush his wrist when she passed him the salad bowl, and something twisted in my stomach. She saw me watching and gave me that familiar smile, the one she'd worn my whole life, a little too perfect, a little too tight. A smile that said, "Don't start drama you can't handle." I laughed it off. We made small talk. Logan excused himself to take a call midway through the meal, and when he came back, he looked flustered. Said it was just work again. I believed him. Or tried to. I told myself couples go through phases. That maybe I'd been too wrapped up in my own stress lately. Maybe he just needed space. Maybe I was imagining the way my mother's voice softened around him. Maybe. But later that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Logan dozed next to me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting. Something quiet. Something dangerous. Like the wind picking up before a storm you can't see yet. The worst part? I didn't know it yet, but the betrayal had already begun. And the storm that was coming wouldn't just break my heart. It would save my life. It started small. A laugh that didn't feel like it belonged to me. A joke that landed flat between us. A pause in the middle of an otherwise ordinary conversation. Something was unraveling, and I couldn't name it yet, but I could feel the threads slipping through my fingers. I started waking up before Logan. Not intentionally, it just happened. I'd lie in the silence of our bedroom, staring at the soft shadows on the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of his breath. We used to wake up tangled together. Now, even in sleep, he kept to his side of the bed. One morning, I rolled over and brushed my hand across the mattress. It was cold. He hadn't come to bed the night before. When I asked him about it later, he said he'd fallen asleep on the couch watching a late game. He even smiled as he said it, like he thought it was cute, like I'd find it endearing. But I didn't remember any game. And the couch cushions looked untouched. Still, I didn't press. Not yet. My mom called that afternoon, right as I was heading out the door to meet Logan for lunch. She sounded chipper. Too chipper. "Hey, baby," she sang, drawing the word out like we were back in high school, and she wanted to borrow my clothes. "What are you up to?" "Just heading to lunch with Logan," I said, digging around my purse for my keys. There was a pause. Not long. Just a second too long. Then she recovered with a bright, "Oh, how nice." "Tell him I said hi." "Sure," I muttered, distracted by the realization that my keys weren't in my purse. I turned back toward the kitchen. "You know," she continued, her voice turning syrupy, "he's such a handsome young man. The kind of guy who just draws people in." My hand froze on the countertop. "What's that supposed to mean?" She laughed, too loud, too fake. "Nothing, honey. Just that he's charming. People probably flirt with him all the time. You better keep an eye on that one." It was the kind of thing she'd always said. A backhanded compliment wrapped in motherly wisdom. But this time, it landed different. My stomach turned. I found my keys on the counter, hung up after a quick goodbye, and drove to the cafe in silence. Logan was already there when I arrived. He stood when he saw me, something he hadn't done in months, and pulled out my chair. I was disarmed for a moment, almost charmed. But then he checked his phone before even sitting down, and the spell broke. "You're early," I said. "Yeah," he said too quickly. "Figured I'd grab us a table before it got busy." His phone buzzed on the table. He turned it over without looking at it.
We made small talk.
I asked about work. He answered, vaguely. He asked about my freelance projects. I gave him a summary. There was no real curiosity in his voice, and I didn't have the energy to pretend. But then, as we finished our food, something happened that I couldn't quite shake. The waitress brought the bill. As Logan reached for his wallet, his phone lit up again. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to glimpse the name. M. No last name. Just a single letter. He grabbed it and flipped it face down again, like a magician hiding a trick. Something cold slid through me. That night, I found myself scrolling through old photos. We used to be happy. I could see it in our eyes. There were so many little memories tucked between those pixels. Road trips, movie nights, the time he surprised me with a rooftop dinner. But as I looked closer, something felt off. Not in the old photos.
In me.
I realized I had stopped taking new ones. Weeks had passed, maybe months, since I'd last felt the urge to capture a moment. And wasn't that telling? When someone's drifting away from you, it doesn't happen all at once. It's more like erosion. A slow, steady disappearing act. They don't slam the door, they just stop closing it all the way. A few days later, I stopped by my mom's place. I hadn't planned to, I just happened to be in the area. Or at least, that's what I told myself. She opened the door in silk pajamas at 3 in the afternoon. Her hair was done. Her makeup was fresh. Jade. What a surprise. I was nearby, I said, trying to peek past her into the living room. The TV was off. No music playing. But something felt lived in. Disrupted. Like someone had just left. She stepped outside to talk, closing the door behind her. "Everything okay?" she asked, tilting her head with that same old performance concern.
Yeah.
"Just thought I'd say hi." She studied me, the smile on her lips faltering just slightly. "Well," she said slowly, "that's sweet. But I was just about to hop into the bath." Another lie. I could see it in her eyes. I left feeling heavier than when I arrived. That night, I dreamed of broken glass. I was walking barefoot through our apartment, calling Logan's name. The lights kept flickering. The floor was littered with shards. And in the mirror above the sink, I saw not my reflection but my mother's. She was smiling. When I woke up, there was sweat on my neck, my sheets tangled like I'd wrestled with the night itself. I looked over at Logan, who was sleeping soundly beside me. I whispered his name. He didn't stir. And I knew something was wrong. Something was coming. But I still had no idea just how deep it would cut. Or that the pain would come wrapped in something stranger. Something twisted. The human heart is strange. You can feel it breaking long before it actually shatters, like hearing a glass slowly cracking under pressure. The sound is quiet, but it vibrates through you. That's what the next week felt like, a low hum of dread, growing louder with every unanswered question. Logan's schedule suddenly shifted. He was working late 3 nights in a row, but never came home looking tired. No complaints, no files scattered across the kitchen table like before. Just a casual toss of his keys into the bowl by the door, and a kiss that landed somewhere near my cheek. The kisses stopped meaning anything. They weren't warm or intimate. They were performed. Mechanical. I didn't ask questions. Not because I trusted him, but because I was afraid I already knew the answers. It was a Wednesday when I first went looking. Not out of spite. Not even out of anger. It was something closer to desperation. He had left in a hurry that morning. Said he had a last-minute client meeting. His laptop bag was gone, his phone with him, but he'd left his tablet charging beside the bed. Normally, I wouldn't have touched it.
But that day, something pulled at me.
A small, aching voice inside me whispered, "You need to know." My fingers hesitated over the screen. I don't know what I was expecting. Explicit messages? Half-naked photos? Something undeniable? What I found was worse. Nothing. There were no messages at all. No recent calls, no emails, no browser history. The whole thing had been scrubbed clean. Reset like a hotel room after checkout. It was too neat. Too perfect. Except one thing.
I don't know what made me check the Notes app.
Maybe instinct. Maybe curiosity. Maybe something more primal. That part of you that feels the truth before it's spoken. And there it was. A note, tucked innocently among grocery lists and appointment reminders. It was titled, "For M." My stomach tightened. I tapped it open. It was short. Just a few lines. "I keep thinking about your hands. That night in the kitchen, you remember? When she almost walked in. I still can't believe how close it was. You were right. We have to be careful now. But I'm not backing out. I want this.
You.
Always have." I stared at the screen for a long time. The words blurred, sharpened, then blurred again. The kitchen. She almost walked in.
Careful now.
There was no name. But there didn't have to be. Only one other person had been in that kitchen with us recently. Only one person who had a key. Only one who could be both so familiar and so off-limits. My mother. I closed the tablet carefully, as though handling a bomb. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited for the shaking in my hands to stop. But it didn't. The betrayal hadn't been spoken aloud. There were no photographs. No lipstick on a collar. Just those words. That tone. That secret, coiled into the sentences like a snake. Still, I tried to convince myself it meant something else. Maybe it was an old message, I thought. Maybe he meant someone else. Maybe M is just a coincidence. But even as the excuses formed in my mind, I knew I didn't believe them. My body already knew the truth, even if my brain hadn't caught up yet. I felt sick. I didn't confront him right away. That's what might surprise people. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the tablet across the room. I didn't storm into my mother's house demanding answers. Instead, I cleaned the apartment. I wiped the counters. I did laundry. I even organized the spice rack. Something about putting order into the chaos gave me a strange sense of control. Later that night, I watched Logan come through the door. He looked happy, relaxed, like a man returning from a weekend away, not someone who had just betrayed the one person who knew him best. "You okay?" he asked, tossing his jacket on the back of the couch. "You look quiet." "I'm just tired," I said. He nodded, already pulling out his phone. That was the moment I knew he didn't see me anymore. Not really. And suddenly I realized something terrifying. This wasn't the worst part. Not yet. Because whatever had happened, whatever had been happening, it wasn't over. They weren't done. And if I wanted to survive this, I had to play it carefully. So I started watching. Really watching. Over the next few days, I kept a mental log. Times he left the house. Places he said he was going. The tone of his voice when he mentioned my mother. How often she called. How quickly she hung up when I answered. It was like piecing together a puzzle from the edges. The picture was forming, slowly, painfully, and it looked nothing like the life I thought I was living. One night, Logan forgot his phone on the kitchen counter when he went to shower. It lit up once. Just once. "See you Friday, same time. M. Red Heart." The message was immediately deleted. But I'd already seen it. My ears started ringing. Friday.
Same time.
The next day was Friday. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the words looping in my head like a bad song. I had to know. For real. No more speculation. No more guessing. I needed to see it. So I made a plan. A quiet one. One he'd never see coming. Because I wasn't going to ask for the truth anymore. I was going to catch it walking through the front door. Friday arrived like a ticking clock. Every minute of that morning moved with a heavy weight, like I was dragging myself through molasses. The sunlight through the blinds felt fake. My coffee tasted like ash. And Logan, my almost fiancé, my best friend, my betrayer, was humming in the shower. Humming. It's strange the details you notice when your life is falling apart. The minty smell of his shaving cream. The sound of him tapping his toothbrush against the sink. The way he smiled at me like nothing was wrong. He had no idea. "Hey, I might be back late again," he said, pulling on his gray sweater. The one my mom had complimented last Christmas. I just nodded. All good. He kissed me. On the forehead. Like I was his kid. Like I was someone to be pitted dash. I held it together until the door closed. Then I counted to 60. Then 100. Then I grabbed my keys. Logan thought I had work. He didn't know I'd taken the day off. I told my boss I had a migraine, which wasn't a total lie. The pressure in my skull felt like it could split me open. I waited 5 minutes, then walked out to my car. Parked a block away, engine running. My phone on silent. A second coffee in the cup holder. I didn't want to blink and miss it. At exactly 2:07 p.m., I saw his car. The silver sedan I used to love riding shotgun in. It slowed at the corner and turned down Sycamore Lane. Sycamore Lane. My mother's street. I followed at a distance, my heart galloping in my chest. My palms were so sweaty I could barely grip the wheel. I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe he was going to see someone else. Maybe it was just some twisted misunderstanding.
But no.
He pulled into her driveway. He didn't knock. He used his own key. And then, casually, like this was normal, the door opened and my mother stepped outside in her robe. Hair wet, smile wide, like she was expecting him dash. I couldn't breathe. Not when she touched his arm. Not when she leaned into him. Not when he laughed and kissed her cheek, the exact way he used to kiss mine dash. I didn't take a picture. I didn't scream or drive up to the house or throw a brick through her window. I just sat there, in my car, in the street where I learned to ride a bike, where I once drew hopscotch squares with chalk while my mom watched from the porch. I sat there for 22 minutes, long enough to know it wasn't just a mistake, long enough to realize this wasn't new dash, long enough to feel something inside me go completely still. When I drove away, I didn't go home. I didn't know where I was going until I pulled into a grocery store parking lot and parked in the far corner, under a broken light. I turned off the engine and just sat. I watched people walk by. Mothers with toddlers. Teenagers with earbuds. A couple holding hands and laughing like the world made sense. My hands were shaking. But I didn't cry. Not yet. What I felt wasn't sadness. It was grief, yes, but deeper than that. I was grieving something I hadn't even realized had already died. My family dash. My future. My sense of safety. I tried to make sense of it. I played back every conversation with Logan. Every visit from my mother. Every time I'd ignored that tug in my gut that whispered, "Something is off dash." But you never think you'll be betrayed like that. Not by her dash. Not by him dash. I finally drove home around dusk. The sky was pink and orange, and I hated how beautiful it looked. I unlocked the door and walked into a silence that felt like it had teeth. There was a note on the kitchen counter. Out running errands. Back soon. Love you, Elle. Love you. I stared at those 2 words, and they burned. Like acid. I picked up the note. I crumpled it slowly, deliberately. Then I tossed it in the trash and sat down at the table, staring at nothing. That's when the shaking stopped. Because something shifted in me, something clean and cold and final. I wasn't going to confront him. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. I was going to leave him dash. Quietly.
Strategically.
I was going to take back everything they thought they had stolen. My sanity. My peace. My future dash. And they wouldn't see it coming. But first, I had to get out. I didn't sleep that night, either. But I planned dash. I made a list of every account with both our names on it. I started changing passwords, rerouting emails, checking balances. I boxed up my important things when he wasn't home, my birth certificate, passport savings. I scheduled a lease visit with a studio on the other side of town. Just 1 bedroom. Nothing special. But it was mine dash. And the strangest thing? Somewhere beneath the heartbreak, I felt relieved. Because I wasn't wondering anymore. I wasn't living in limbo. The illusion was gone.
And now?
Now I had freedom dash. What I didn't know then, not yet, was that fate wasn't done with me. Because a few days later, on the day I finally packed my last bag and walked out of that apartment, I stepped off the curb outside and nearly died. It came out of nowhere, a delivery van, speeding through the intersection. It hit me, full force. Screams. Tires. Blackness. Then everything went quiet. Pain woke me up. Not the kind that tugs gently or throbs like a dull headache. This was a sharp, roaring pain, like my bones were being crushed from the inside out. And when I opened my eyes, the world was blurry, sterile, blinding. A beep echoed somewhere near my ear. Then another. Then another. It took a few long seconds for everything to stop spinning. Fluorescent ceiling. Thin hospital curtain. That antiseptic smell that screams, something terrible just happened dash. I blinked. My lips felt dry and cracked. I tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. A nurse appeared beside me, mid-30s maybe, with kind eyes and tired shoulders. She looked relieved. "You're awake," she said softly. "That's good. You're in the hospital. You were hit by a van. Do you remember any of that?" I didn't. Not really. Flashes, maybe. Crossing the street. My fingers on my suitcase handle. Then impact. Screams. A car door slamming. Darkness. I tried to move, but a stabbing pain shot through my side, and I gasped. "Easy, sweetheart," she said, adjusting something on the foredrip. "You've got 3 fractured ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and some bad bruising down your spine. No internal bleeding, though. You're lucky."
Lucky.
That word sat bitter in my mouth. The first night was the worst. I drifted in and out of sleep, caught between painkillers and memory. Sometimes I dreamed I was back at my mother's house, looking through her window, seeing them together. Sometimes I was standing in the street again, headlights bearing down on me, frozen. Sometimes I was just floating, weightless, soundless, untethered. When I woke up for good, it was still dark. A nurse had left a paper cup of water by my bed. My phone was on the tray table, miraculously intact. 12 missed calls from Logan, and 5 from my mom. I didn't listen to any of them. I stared at the screen until the battery died, and it was just me again, alone in the silence. The police report said the van driver was texting and ran a red light. Apparently, I flew 6 feet before hitting the pavement. I had a concussion and a cracked tooth. They were worried about a spinal fracture at first, but the CT scan ruled it out. Still, I'd need weeks of recovery. Physical therapy.
Rest.
Patience. The doctor told me, "You're young. You'll bounce back." But I didn't feel young. I felt ancient. Like something had cracked open inside me that no surgeon could fix. By the 3rd day, I had a room with a window. The view wasn't much, just a parking lot and the side of a medical building, but the sunlight helped. So did the silence.
No Logan.
No mother.
No explanations.
No forced apologies or empty justifications. Just quiet. And me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was being watched.
Judged.
Measured. I could think. Really think dash. They say that when people cheat, it's about weakness. That it's not about you, it's about them. I used to believe that. But with Logan and my mother, it felt personal. Too. Targeted dash. Not just selfish, but strategic. Almost like I'd been erased from my own life. And still I'd loved them. Trusted them. Wanted so badly to belong. To be safe. That I missed what was right in front of me. Maybe I didn't want to see it. But lying in that hospital bed, with my body wrapped in gauze and my heart cracked open, I finally saw it for what it was. They'd done me a favor. Because if Logan hadn't betrayed me, if my mother hadn't lied to my face, if I'd never found them in that house, holding each other like I'd never existed, then I never would have left. And if I hadn't left, I would have been standing in the intersection a few seconds earlier. And if I'd been standing there just a moment sooner, I would have been dead dash. The timing wasn't just tragic. It was surgical. As though the universe itself had cut me loose from the life I thought I wanted, and shoved me into the one I actually needed. A life where I wasn't tolerating half-love. A life where I wasn't apologizing for feeling too much. A life where I wasn't making room for people who would steal from me and smile while doing it. The accident broke me.
But it also spared me.
Because when the paramedics pulled me from the pavement, I was no longer someone's girlfriend. No longer someone's daughter. I was just me dash. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of everything. The nurses said someone came to visit. I pretended to be asleep. They left flowers. A pale bouquet of white lilies and baby's breath. Expensive. Impersonal. I asked the nurse to throw them away. A few days later, my friend Camila came. She sat at the edge of the bed and didn't ask what happened. She just held my hand while I cried for the first time since the accident. She told me I had a place to stay when I was ready. She told me I wasn't alone. And for once, I believed her. I left the hospital 10 days later with a cane, a brace on my shoulder, and a new lease agreement in my inbox. The apartment was small and a little noisy. The water heater was moody. The walls were thin. But it was mine. And when I looked in the mirror, bruised and scarred and hurting, I didn't see a victim. I saw someone who had survived something that was meant to destroy her dash. Someone who had been betrayed and broken, and still chose to rise. The apartment was small, but the morning light hit just right. A week after moving in, I stood by the kitchen window with my mug of cheap instant coffee, listening to the muffled city hum through the cracked glass. I still had a limp. I still flinched every time I crossed a street. But my breathing was steadier now. I could sleep without waking up drenched in panic. The silence I used to dread had become a comfort. Then one Saturday morning, 3 weeks after the accident, there was a knock at the door. Not a buzz from the lobby. A knock dash. Someone was already on the floor. Right outside. I froze. Another knock. Louder this time.
Familiar rhythm.
I opened the door, and there she was. My mother. Hair freshly styled, lips painted, her eyes glossy but defiant. She didn't say anything at first. Just stood there holding a gift bag like this was some holiday gathering and not the final scene in a long, twisted play. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I didn't answer. She didn't wait. She walked past me like she still had the right. Like my doorway was still hers to pass through. I stood stiff in the hall. The smell of her perfume, vanilla and ambition, brought everything back. Sunday mornings. Childhood dance recitals. That awful moment by the window. She set the bag on my tiny kitchen counter and turned to me. "You look thin," she said. "Are you eating?" I blinked. She looked down, ashamed for half a second, and then the mask went back up. "I heard you moved out," she continued. "Camila told me you were hurt. I wanted to check in earlier, but I wasn't sure you wanted to see me." She said it like it was modesty, like she was giving me space, not avoiding consequences. I crossed my arms. "So you're here now. Why?" She took a deep breath. "I made a mistake, Jade." That made me laugh, sharp and humorless. "A mistake?" I echoed. "I didn't plan it," she said quickly. "It wasn't like I set out to hurt you. Logan and we were both lonely. You two were always fighting. He needed someone to talk to. I didn't mean for anything to happen."
Isterte her.
"You didn't mean to sleep with my boyfriend?" She flinched. "It wasn't just sex. We don't," I said, holding up my hand. "Don't try to dress it up." Silence. She looked down again, hands twisting in that nervous, girlish way she always used when caught. "I've lost sleep over this," she whispered. "I miss you." I wanted to scream. "You miss me? You stole from me, lied to me, let me walk away bleeding." But instead I said, "Do you even know what happened that day?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "The day I found you two. The day I walked out." She hesitated. "You left. You were angry." "No," I said, my voice low. I was crossing the street, walking to Camila's, trying not to fall apart. And I got hit by a van. I spent 10 days in the hospital. Broken ribs. Dislocated shoulder. You didn't know because I turned off my phone. Because I didn't want you to find me." Her mouth fell open. "You were, oh my God. I almost died," I said, not for sympathy, but for clarity. "And you were playing house with my boyfriend." She covered her mouth. "Jade, I didn't know." "I know, I said. That's the point. You didn't even think to look. We stood in silence for a long time. The kind that stretches and pulls at something deeper than rage, something like grief. Eventually, she whispered, I'm sorry. I studied her. For a moment, she looked like the woman who used to braid my hair. The woman who made pancakes in silly shapes and whispered affirmations into my pillow when I was too anxious to sleep before tests. But that woman had also vanished a long time ago. And whatever this was, this apology, this regret, it wasn't about love. It was about guilt. And that wasn't enough. Not anymore. I walked to the door and opened it. She looked at me startled. You're kicking me out? No, I said. I'm letting you go. She hesitated. Jade, please don't do this. We're family. I smiled sadly. You stopped being family the moment you chose him. She tried to protest, but I stepped aside and said nothing more. Eventually, she picked up the gift bag, turned and walked out. I closed the door behind her and locked it. Then I leaned against it, exhaled.
And cried.
Not because I was broken, but because I was finally free. In the weeks that followed, I started writing again. Nothing fancy, just little journal entries, memories, pieces of myself I had buried for too long. Camila brought over books and puzzles, and 1,000 kinds of tea. We laughed until midnight like teenagers again. I went to physical therapy twice a week, and each time I lifted my arm a little higher, I reminded myself that healing isn't just about muscle or bone. It's about boundaries, about choosing peace, again and again. Logan tried calling a few more times. He even showed up once. I didn't answer the door. I didn't need to. He belonged to the old story, and I was already writing a new one. I don't think betrayal is ever something you get over. You just learn to carry it differently. You learn to stop asking why they did it and start asking why you stayed. You stop needing the apology and start building a life where nothing like that ever gets close enough to hurt you again. In the end, it wasn't the accident that saved me. And it wasn't the betrayal. It was the leaving. The moment I stepped away from people who only loved me when it was convenient and started loving myself without conditions. That's the moment my life truly began.